Hey guys, I'm Pandora Saunders. I'm a leadership coach and I specialize in identifying bottlenecks in businesses so that we can unlock your delegation skills and allow your firm to grow because it frees up the capacity of the owner. So today I wanted to talk about failing forward. Everyone makes mistakes. You're going to make mistakes as a leader. Your employees are going to make mistakes. What separates failing forward from just failing is that you're learning from the mistakes. And that's what you want to do, is be able to move forward. And how you deal with those failures and how you learn from them, it's going to set the culture for your firm. So you have to choose whether you're going to deal with that failure in a way that is going to change your behavior and teach you in the future, or if you're just going to let it drag you down and make you feel like a horrible person. And if you decide to hide it or sweep it under the rug, that is going to speak loud and clear to your employees about how failing in this environment is not okay. It's not safe. So what are your employees going to do? They're going to try to sweep it under the rug or point their fingers elsewhere or come up with excuses, etc. So really, you set the culture in your firm about failing. Most businesses today are pretty complicated. They have more people, more customers, more stress, and along with that comes more mistakes. So the question isn't how do we stop failing? There are always going to be mistakes because you're dealing with people. And you just have to learn how to deal with those mistakes in a healthy fashion that's going to improve your company. So how do you do that? What you're going to do is you're going to take the failure, you're going to evaluate it, analyze how it needs to change your future or your actions in the future, and then you're going to commit to doing that again next time so it fixes the failure. So for years, John Maxwell, he's one of the top leadership coaches in the country. He says, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. But here's the bit that a lot of leaders overlook when it comes to that. Learning doesn't happen by itself. You've got to actually have that reflection and the thinking about how it's going to change your actions. It doesn't just automatically lead to learning. And unfortunately, nowadays, a lot of people have been brought up in a culture that encourages you to sweep the problems under the rug and pretend like it wasn't your fault. And so you need to intentionally change that in your firm. And it starts with yourself. So what's going to happen is your employees are going to be looking to you. And when you make a mistake, what do you do? Do you admit the mistake, or do you try to hide it or downplay it or ignore it? The best thing you can do is say, oh my goodness, I made this mistake. Oh dear, I really learned this from that mistake, and I am going to do this in the future. And really, I find if you keep it more lighthearted when a mistake like that happens, then your employees are going to react a lot better. Because when they see you treat yourself like that, they're going to understand that that's your attitude towards failure, and they're going to be a lot more likely to go to you, admit that there was a mistake, and do the exact same thing. They're going to model that behavior, and that creates the culture. And then along with that is remember to treat it the same way as you did for your mistake. Don't come down really hard on them and go, oh yeah, I remember when I learned that lesson. And then you go ahead and you make sure that they have the tools to be able to change whatever it is that they need to change for the next time. But don't make a big deal about it and really come down hard on them. Now, there are some things that are more severe than others, but for the most part, those are not going to be the mistakes that you're going to be working with on a daily basis. But they will have an easier time coming to you about the big things if you're treating them well about the small things. So don't hurry past the faults. Don't downplay them. Don't wait and sit on them. Just make sure that you address them, but don't make it overly big of a deal. So your team's paying attention. They're going to see, are you getting nervous? Are you turning stuff off? Are you avoiding? Stay away from that. Stay calm. And just handle it in a fashion that you would want them to handle it in. So that kind of leads me to my first story. I was once in a review of a project after it was done, and the goal was to discuss about what went wrong in the project, right? So it was a typical after action review where you go in and you figure out what was wrong. And I'm used to after action reviews where you go in, you identify the problem, and say, what could we do better next time? Just like we discussed with failing forward. In this case, every time I tried to come up with an answer to the problem, I was cut off. And they informed me, we don't solve problems here. We only find the problems. That kind of made me pause in my tracks. I posed a basic inquiry. Okay, so when do we talk about the fixes? And it became very evident they had no plan to talk about the fixes. No meeting, no follow-up, no plan. We found difficulties and then we just left them. That made the whole review process absolutely useless. It didn't change anything about our behavior in the future. And maybe what they were going for is the next time we did a project, hopefully someone would remember that we had an issue and then maybe troubleshoot it at that point. But that's a very poor system to use to try to make things better. So let's see. So failing forward is supposed to be a systemic way to fail. So it goes through steps. So everyone's going to fail, but then what are the steps that happen after the failure? So one, you identify what the problem was. So someone actually has to bring up, okay, this is where it failed. You take responsibility for it. And it's interesting how people will start taking responsibility for it when they see it's safe to do so. Like, oh dear, that was my thing. And someone else on the team will be like, oh no, it wasn't just your fault. It was my fault too. Like if it's a safe place, you'll see all of these people start to take responsibility and figure out what they can change to become better, because people want to get better. They don't want to feel like failures usually. Hopefully if you're hiring people that do want to blame it on other people and don't want to get better, they may not be a good fit for the firm. But for the most part, if you get a good team together, they're going to be trying to make things better and help out their teammates. All right, so then you want to be clear on what the roles are. You want to look at the system. Okay, where did the failures in the system happen? And where can we improve those? Who is handling that part of the system? So what can they do different next time? And you're really focusing on this is where the system broke, not on, oh, this was your part of the system and you failed. We don't want to do that. Don't make it personal. And then you're going to update that system in the future or change the behavior. Sometimes it's not necessarily the system, it's the authority. Like they didn't think they had the authority to do something. So for instance, they didn't return an email in a timely fashion because they were waiting on approval from somebody else. And that, you can look at and say, okay, do we need to transfer authority so they can make the decision, or is that something they really need to wait on? So some of it is just shifting around responsibilities like that. Okay, but you need to list at least one thing that needs to be changed that fixes it in the future. Leaders don't do this a lot of time because it really does require humility. As leaders, we have a tendency to believe that if we admit that we had made a mistake, that we're going to lose our authority. People aren't going to trust you as much. But that's actually exactly the opposite. You lose your authority when people stop trusting you. And if you admit when you make mistakes and you handle it properly, they will actually trust you more. And so it will give you more of what they call the law of the buy-in. If you listen to John Maxwell, the law of the buy-in, they'll buy in more to you when they see that you're humble and that you are also kind to them when they're having failures of their own. Now let's talk a little bit about culture, because culture isn't just values or culture posters that you put up. You can't just say, this is our culture, but then not live that culture. I had an old firm that I used to work for that used to say, we don't get people in trouble here. Nobody gets in trouble here. But then you would get in trouble. And they thought just by not calling it getting in trouble meant that they weren't really getting people in trouble, which is absolutely silly. A rose by any other name will smell just as sweet. So you can't force the culture by saying this is our culture. You actually have to live it. And the culture with failing becomes toxic when the company no longer treats failing as a normal, good process for people to learn. I once went to a leadership retreat. It was a Zoom retreat, and the company had two owners. Only one of them was able to come, and he wanted to know what other leaders thought on the team about some changes that they were making. And he didn't like the feedback he was getting. The feedback, it wasn't harsh, but it wasn't in the direction that they wanted it to go. And there was some good reason for that, where the leaders were like, well, we'd like to do this with it instead. And he was getting really frustrated because it was not the feedback that he wanted. And finally, he got angry. He said he just raged at the group for a while on, how they didn't trust the owners of the firm, and how I don't even remember exactly what it was all about, but man, he was not happy, and he went on for quite a while. Then he told us, you know what, go work on these group things together. And he got off the Zoom. He turned his camera off. Apparently he was still there. And there were a couple other employees that were still had their Zoom cameras on, and he had just told us to work in groups. And so I was like, oh, I better do exactly what he told me to do. So I tried asking the other people that had their Zoom cameras on. I'm like, are we supposed to text each other about doing this group project or what? He heard me, hopped back on the Zoom, reamed me out for a while. I have no idea why. I was just trying to do the group thing he talked about. And then he got off. And then about 20 minutes later, he called everybody back on again. And it was obvious that someone, maybe multiple people, told the other owner about what had just happened. And he was being forced to apologize. And he basically got on there, told us he was sorry, he should never have talked to us like that. But these are all the reasons I was justified, and reamed us out some more. And it was like, sorry, not sorry. And he went on for a while. So what do you think in this case that as leaders that did to our culture? Well, one, we learned we can't give honest feedback. And with these guys, it was pretty evident from that and other instances that weren't quite as bad, that really what they needed to have happen was a lot of build up to them. They were insecure, or at least he was. The other owner was a little better, but he was an insecure leader who believed in the positional leadership, which is the lowest level of leadership in the John Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership. He thought because he was the owner, that made him a leader. And really, you have to have the buy-in from the people. So in this case, yes, he was a leader, and people would follow him because he had that title, but that's really not the best leadership model that you want. And then the other thing is that it was not a safe place in general. Obviously, he was willing to get very mad at us and not really take feedback. He showed how he reacted to feedback. And usually when someone reacts to feedback in a certain way, they expect you to react to feedback in a certain way. So it was no longer a safe place because he felt that he was being threatened with feedback. And it wasn't even bad feedback. It wasn't like we were giving him personal feedback on his leadership or anything. It was just on these programs. And so what's going to happen is when he gives you feedback, he's going to do it in that same spirit. And that makes it very unsafe because you know that they are being critical on you because they take feedback as criticism. So it creates a horrible culture. And so in that place, it became a culture where you didn't give honest feedback. They always just built up the leader, said whatever they could to make it sound like the leaders were doing a great job and they were nice. And they were okay, but they weren't great leaders, and their firm was kind of stuck. It had a bottleneck because of micromanaging and all of this. So make sure that you're handling feedback and you're modeling a good culture. You can't destroy your culture like that. Okay, so people are going to keep themselves safe if they see poor behavior. And it's not a problem with the people, it's a leadership problem. Great leaders know that failure is a lesson and you will have to pay it. I heard a great saying from a group that I attend where it was, the universe has a curriculum. And failure is definitely part of that curriculum. And you're going to learn all about failure, whether you like it or not. So you might as well go to school. And leaders know that good leaders know that they're going to be wrong sometimes. And they think they will learn from it. And that will actually make you less defensive to really get that into your head. I'm going to make mistakes. This is the process that I have, and it's okay. The universe has a curriculum, and I'm going to learn it. So remember, failure isn't going to cause you to lose your power. Loss of trust is going to make you lose your power. So don't go there. Make sure you're admitting mistakes, taking responsibility, and changing the system that you're in. It's safe to say this isn't working, so you're not attacking anyone with it. I see a risk here, so we need to fix a system. Or, I don't agree with how we're fixing that system, and talking about why. So this helps facilitate learning when you ask those questions. You're not attacking anyone directly. You're focusing on the system, and you're just trying to stop the problem from happening again. Okay. So remember, don't punish the feedback that you're getting. Remember that maturity in leadership means failing forward. It's quiet, it's true, it's well organized. Just failing is going to make you scared. And failing ahead leads to progress, while just failing leaves you behind. The other thing I want to go into is that one of the big fears that owners of firms have is that I can't afford the mistakes. I'm going to lose money if there's mistakes. So let's discuss that for a minute. Because what happens is the firm owners do not delegate to their team because they're afraid of these mistakes happening. But how much is that not delegating costing you? So if you are bogged down in most of your day doing daily client-related work, then you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing in a firm if you're trying to scale your firm. You are just doing a daily job, and maybe you like that job, and that's fine if you like it. If you like doing the daily client work, then you're happy there, and that's great. If you're trying to build your firm so that you're actually going to go beyond what you personally can handle, you're going to have to learn how to delegate. And let's say that somebody makes a mistake and it costs you $50,000. Okay, that's a good chunk of money for a year, $50,000. But let's look at what not delegating you're losing. If you don't learn to delegate, and let's say you're a $2 million a year firm, but let's say if you delegated so you could actually go out and do the marketing and stuff that you should be doing as a leader or as the owner of a firm, then you could build up your firm to a $10 million a year firm. That's an $8 million difference. What drop in the bucket is $50,000 compared to that $8 million? You're losing out on $8 million because you're afraid they're going to make a $50,000 mistake. Like, it can hurt in the moment. Don't get me wrong. I get it. And it could be that you have 5 of these $50,000 mistakes. Hopefully they're different mistakes and you're not doing the same thing again and again. Otherwise, we have to go learning about failing forward all over again. But you need to realize that by not delegating, you're actually losing a whole lot more money than if you delegate and they screw up. And what's even better is if you learn that coaching, which is part of what you're freeing up your time for by delegating, is coaching the leaders underneath you. As you do that weekly coaching, you're going to be able to hand off the delegation items, that authority that goes along with that, in a much safer manner that is going to provide more trust. And I like to compare it to like teaching a kid how to drive. My daughter, both my daughters, I didn't just throw them the keys and send them out to go drive. I mean, we started in parking lots. We went slow. I was right there watching what they were able to do, what they were handling, how their skills were going. And then slowly we built up to harder and harder things on the roadway. That's what you're doing with delegating, is you have to go small bit by small bit. And part of this is the failing forward, a huge part of it. They are going to make mistakes, but they're going to do contained mistakes. And that's okay. And if they do get up to a level of authority that's higher, where they're handling more items that could lead to larger mistakes that cost you more, that's okay too. They shouldn't be a huge amount of those happening. But remember, 8 million versus 50,000. I think you want the 8 million with a $50,000 mistake here or there. All right, so go ahead, like, subscribe if you like this content, and I will do some more of it. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.